we're going to quickly learn about setting up SSH keys for GitHub. This is essentially the same method of setting up keys for other services, such as GitLab as well. So anything we learn here can be applied to other services as well. I actually prefer using SSH keys over HTTPS for GitLab just because it's easier for me. I don't have to set up 2FA, or generally it's safer because you don't have to actually set up a password, and the key is the only method to actually authenticate here. So first, to get started, we need to generate a private and public key combination for your SSH Key Pair. Let's start by navigating to your terminal and issue the following command: SSH keygen -t ed25519-c, and we're going to put in our email here. For me, I'm going to just do an example email. So once we have this command ready, we can start this keygen process by pressing enter. This is going to start generating this. So if you don't have any SSH keys set up prior, you could just hit enter here. What I'm going to hit is going to be example key. But like I mentioned, the default path is completely fine if you haven't set this up prior before. So enter the passphrase. This is completely optional. I personally don't use a passphrase on SSH keys here just because I don't think it's necessary, since I'm the only one using this machine and it's heavily locked down. But if you do have a shared machine and you're worried about others contributing to your code or doing anything nefarious, I think having a passphrase is really useful to lock that down. So we're going to skip this by pressing enter. And we're going to hit enter again. This is going to generate the key, and you're going to see the randomR image below, so that shows that the key has been generated. Now, if we actually just do an ls, we're going to actually see that there's an example key and an example key.pub within that directory that we just created. The example key is the private key because it doesn't have the .pub extension. Private key is something that you want to keep a secret. It's going to be on your machine, and you don't want to share that out. But that's used to communicate to any of the public keys. So the public key is what we're actually going to be using today in setting up in GitHub. And in GitHub, this is actually what your private key is going to consistently reach out to be able to make these calls for cloning and adding and pushing to your code to GitHub here. So next, what we're going to need to do is first confirm that the SSH agent is running, and then we're going to add our private key to our SSH agent for being able to tell our machine that that private key can be used to communicate out to public keys. First, to enable our SSH agent, or to ensure that it's running, we're going to run eval $, open parenthesis, SSH agent -s, close that parenthesis, and close the quotation. We see the agent PID. That's perfect. That means it's running. Then we're going to issue the command ssh-add-k. This -k actually isn't necessary if you're on Linux or Windows. Just keep that in mind. And the path that you're going to want to use if you did the default will be tilde /.sh//id ed25519. If you did change this name, make sure that you're actually grabbing the private key path here, and that's where you're adding it from. For me, since I just added my key as example key in this directory, I'm actually just going to add this as example key. So once we add that, it says identity added, and it shows the email that I added within that key. So that's successful. So next, now that we have this added to the SSH agent, we need to set this up with GitHub. To be able to do this, let's navigate over to GitHub first. If we navigate over to GitHub, and we click in our profile in the top right, and we click Settings, we can navigate down on the left to SSH and GPG keys, and we're going to hit this new SSH key button. So we need two things here. We need the title and we need the key. And the key is the public key. So the title, we're just going to call this MacBook, since that's the work machine that I'm actually working on. And the key, we need to navigate back over to our terminal and collect. There's two ways to do this. So if we do another ls, we see that we have the private key and we have the public key. Note, this may be in the SSH directory prior if you generated this as default. So there's a couple ways we can do this. If you're on Mac, you can run pbcopy > tilde. You're going to want to do the SSH path to your public key, id ed 255.19.pub. Now, if you were running this as a default, you can hit enter, and that will actually copy that key there for you to paste in. What I do want to note is if you change the name, that's going to be needing to be changed, and you also want to make sure that you add the .pub there. You don't want to add your private key here because this isn't going to work. Plus, the private key should be secret. So for me, what I'm going to do is just pull from the example key .pub, and that should copy it. If you're on Linux or Windows and pbcopy isn't available for you, you can also just cat the file out, and you can cat example key.pub, for example, or put the directory in front of that. But when you cat that file out, you can actually just copy and paste that from the terminal within GitHub. So we're going to go over and we're going to paste this public key in. It's going to have my email at the back, just like I set up. And we're going to hit add SSH key. So now we see this within GitHub. It's added this, it named it as MacBook. And let's test this. Make sure that this actually works. I'm going to navigate back, and I created a simple test repo that has a README file, and instead of cloning this by HTTPS, I want to clone this by SSH to test. So navigate back over to my terminal. I'm going to do a git clone, and that's going to actually be using the SSH instead of the HTTPS, as I mentioned. This is going to clone. If we do ls, it's actually going to show us that we have the SSH test repository there, and the files within it. I hope this tutorial has been helpful for you to quickly get up and running with SSH in GitHub. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe for more content.